I remember that morning as if it were the only morning that ever mattered. I stood by the kitchen counter, waiting for a goodbye kiss. That was our little routine. Olivia would pause on her way out, keys in one hand, purse in the other, to lean in, brush her lips against mine, and say something about the day ahead. I used to take that moment for granted, never suspecting how silence could crush a man. But that day, I waited, and she never turned around. I could see her reflection in the window above the sink. The sun was barely up, throwing a dull grayish-blue light across the backyard. Olivia hesitated at the doorway. I thought she'd forgotten something, her phone, or that stack of graded papers she always kept in a neat folder. But no, she glanced back, and our eyes met, but it was as if she were looking through me. Then she stepped out the door, quietly shutting it behind her. The click of the latch stung more than any slap. I stood there, a knot tightening in my gut. It wasn't anger yet. It was something more primal. Fear. The fear you feel when you sense the ground beneath you shifting, as though the house you spent years paying for suddenly wants to swallow you whole. I remember I placed my hand on the countertop to steady myself, and in that quiet, all I could think was, did she ever love me, or did I just fail to notice that she'd stopped? Time slowed. I listened to the hum of the fridge, the drip of the faucet. The overhead light flickered once, a faint buzz that filled the room. My mind went blank. I thought about getting ready for work, but it seemed pointless. I wanted to stand there and convince myself I was mistaken, that maybe it was a bad dream. But reality clung to me like a cold wind. Eventually, I made it out the door, got into my car, and drove to the office. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking, that maybe she was just distracted or stressed about something at work. But deep inside, I knew that morning was more than an oversight. Sometimes you can sense the final shift in a relationship, the exact moment love turns cold. That day, fear had taken root in my chest, and I couldn't shake it. A week later, I found myself in the security room at the condominium building where her friend lived. It was supposed to be a routine check. I managed to talk the front desk staff into letting me see if they captured me misplacing my wallet. A lie, obviously. But they seemed bored, overworked, or simply disinterested enough to let me look. I was so certain I'd see nothing that would confirm my darkest suspicions, so sure I was chasing ghosts. But I had to know. Fear, once planted, demands certainty. On the screen, tiny black and white figures moved in the narrow box of the elevator camera. I recognized Olivia the moment she stepped inside. The quality wasn't great, but it was enough. She had her hair in that loose wave she liked to wear, a small handbag over one shoulder, and the dress, dark blue, professional, hugging her just right, was unmistakable. Then another figure joined her. My breath stalled. His face came into view, and they both laughed at something. The elevator doors slid shut. I could see them talking. It looked innocent at first, a man and a woman chatting, maybe colleagues or neighbors. But then their faces drew closer. My eyes focused on her posture, how she tilted her head, how she reached for his arm. My heart pounded, each beat flooding me with an odd mix of rage and despair. The next moment, he pressed her against the elevator wall, and she let him. The kiss was hungry, their bodies locked together with no hesitation. The camera caught the angle just enough for me to see her fingers slide up the back of his neck, gripping him like she never wanted to let go. My mind went numb. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have the strength. All I could do was stare, my fingers clenched around the desk in front of me. They parted as the elevator slowed, breathing heavily in those few seconds. She adjusted her hair. He straightened his shirt. The doors opened, they stepped out, and the footage ended. For a brief moment, the screen showed an empty elevator. Then another replay started. I switched it off. My mouth tasted bitter. I didn't think. I just walked out of the security room, ignoring the clerk's questions. My ears rang, my vision tunneled. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had happened. Cars passed. People chattered on their phones. The bright afternoon sun glared off the metal handrails. But inside me, the ground cracked wide open. That image of them, the rawness, the familiarity, seared itself into my mind. I had no doubt. This wasn't a one-time fling with a stranger. This was personal, intimate, a bond they'd obviously nurtured in secret. And the worst part was the absence of shame in the way they kissed. It was so free, so completely unburdened, as though I were a shadow that never existed in Olivia's life. I sat in my car for who knows how long, staring at the steering wheel. People passed on the sidewalk. My phone buzzed with emails. It was the middle of the day, and I was supposed to be in a meeting in an hour. But I just sat there, the memory of that footage on loop in my head. I felt trapped in my own body, my breath shallow, my heart hammered as though it wanted to break out of my chest. Fear, heartbreak, rage. They collided inside me, turning my thoughts to static. That night, I drove home later than usual, hoping she'd be asleep. The house was dark, except for one lamp in the living room. I remember the warm glow it cast on the walls, how that single lamp made the rest of the space look emptier. Olivia was on the couch, reading a novel. She looked up and gave me a faint smile, the kind you give to a stranger at the bus stop. Nothing about her expression hinted at guilt or remorse. She seemed comfortable, at ease in our home, acting as though everything was perfectly normal. Late night, she asked quietly, closing her book. "Work ran long," I replied. My voice was hoarse, though I tried to sound casual. I removed my jacket and tossed it on a nearby chair. In the lamp's glow, I could see the mild concern on her face. But there was something else too, an edge I couldn't quite place. It infuriated me that she could appear so calm while I felt like a burning wreck. I wanted to confront her right then. Every bone in my body screamed to demand an explanation, to tear down whatever facade she was wearing. But fear kept me silent. The fear of hearing her confirm the truth, the fear of losing everything. Instead, I asked how her day went, and she gave me some bland details. Teaching was fine. The kids were rowdy. She had lunch with a colleague. The casual lie coiled around my heart like a snake. She didn't ask about my day, and I didn't volunteer anything. Her phone buzzed once. She glanced at it, typed a response, and set it aside. There was an unspoken tension, but I forced a thin smile and nodded. After a few minutes, she yawned and said she was heading to bed. As she walked down the hallway, I wondered if she'd pause to invite me along, or maybe give me that missing kiss. She didn't. I stood in the living room, the lamp throwing my shadow against the wall. That shape looked like a stranger to me, like I was watching someone else's life from a distance. I felt alone in my own house. Over the next few days, I learned more. I pieced together little clues like a detective who already knows the culprit but needs evidence for the case. Her phone would buzz at odd hours, and she'd hide the screen. She suddenly had teachers' workshops that didn't quite match the schedule I knew. And once I spotted a gift bag in her closet, some cologne that certainly wasn't for me. When the name Daniel Morris came up, I recognized it. He was the high school English teacher at a nearby school, sometimes meeting with the elementary staff for combined projects. "He's a great mentor," she'd said months before. "We're working on a literacy initiative for older kids who struggle with reading." At the time, I'd thought it admirable. Now it made me sick to recall how impressed I was by the stories she told. This was the man who took her in that elevator, who pressed himself to her in a way I used to. I didn't speak up. I bottled everything inside, hoping, foolishly, that maybe it would pass, or that I was wrong. At night, I lay awake, listening to her gentle breathing beside me, and felt a chasm between us. She didn't cling to me in her sleep like she used to. I stared at the ceiling, letting my own imagination torment me with thoughts of them together. When I finally ordered the DNA test, it wasn't because I suspected our sons weren't mine. That's the ironic part. I never truly doubted that. But in my mind, every shred of normalcy was under question. So I spit into that little tube, sent it off, and told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the wait would calm my nerves. The results came back faster than I expected. I opened the email in my office alone. I held my breath, eyes scanning the words. Everything was normal for our older boy. But the younger, the lines of text blurred. 99% match with Daniel Morris. My phone almost slipped from my hand. I blinked. Read it again, just to be sure. Then I closed my eyes. My entire body felt cold, as if all the blood drained out in an instant. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at that email. The fear inside me became something else, an ache so deep I couldn't name it, a sense of betrayal so complete I could hardly breathe. Was everyone in on this except me? Did my older son know? Did my own wife live a double life all these years? Memories flooded back. The day she announced her second pregnancy, the tears of joy in her eyes, the relief on her face when I said everything was going to be okay. It all replayed in slow motion, warped by the knowledge that she must have already known it wasn't mine. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Pick up milk on your way home." My hand shook. I typed, "Sure," and pressed send. The normalcy of that text infuriated me, as if nothing was wrong, as if the world was still intact. That evening, I decided to confront her in a different way. Going head-on was pointless. She'd deny or spin some story, and I might lose control. Instead, I decided to push her to a point where she might reveal something without realizing it. So I drove to a nearby bar, told her I'd be late, and then invited a mutual friend of hers to join me. I pretended I wanted casual company, but truthfully, I was hoping for a slip of the tongue, some accidental admission. Marla, her friend, arrived half an hour later. She looked surprised to see me alone. We sat down, the low lights casting glints on the bottles lined behind the bar. It was a dim, quiet place, punctuated by the occasional laugh from a group near the door. I nursed a whiskey, swirling it in my glass. "You okay?" she asked after a few minutes of forced small talk. I shrugged, taking another sip. Just needed a break from everything. Sometimes it feels like I'm the last to know what's going on in my own life. She frowned, shifting in her seat. "Michael, I'm not sure I follow." I turned to face her, letting the golden glow of the bar lamp graze the side of my face. "I saw something," I said quietly. "Something about Olivia." Marla's eyes flickered with guilt. She lowered her gaze. "Listen, maybe you should talk to her about it." That was confirmation enough. She knew. I exhaled slowly, controlling the anger that flared in me. "So you do know," I whispered, more statement than question. "Makes sense. You're her friend." She reached for her glass, took a quick sip of white wine. Her lips trembled slightly. "It's not my place. It's between the two of you." An odd calmness settled over me. My heart was racing, but outwardly I was collected. "I understand. I'm not expecting you to throw her under the bus. But now you see how I feel." Marla stared into her wine. She didn't answer. I let the silence sit between us. In that gap, I could almost hear her thoughts. She knew Olivia was cheating, but friend loyalty kept her from spelling it out. After a beat, she touched my hand. "I'm sorry," was all she said, her voice cracking. "Really, Michael?" I nodded, drained my glass, and gestured for the bartender to refill. I didn't press further. I'd heard enough. Marla's eyes, the regret in them, was all the proof I needed that the people close to us had been tiptoeing around this secret. I felt strangely relieved it was in the open. At least now I knew the world wasn't just in my head. We parted ways after one more drink. She offered me a ride, concerned about my state, but I declined. I needed to walk off the edge of my anger. Later, as I stumbled home, only slightly tipsy, more numb than drunk, I realized no one would come clean with me. Olivia would keep living her lie. Daniel would keep living his, and everyone would pretend for as long as they could. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow. My head pounded, and the memory of last night's conversation weighed on me. I stared at the bedroom ceiling, the sunlight creeping through the blinds. Beside me, Olivia was already up, or maybe she hadn't slept much. I heard the faint clink of dishes from the kitchen. I got dressed mechanically, not really caring what I wore. My reflection in the mirror looked older, more haunted. There were dark circles under my eyes, my jaw set tight. As I headed downstairs, the smell of coffee filled the air. Usually that would comfort me, but now it felt like a mockery of normal life. Olivia was at the table, sipping from a mug, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, gave me the polite smile of a coworker who barely knows you. I poured myself coffee, sat down across from her. The tension was suffocating. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, not looking up. I shrugged. "Not really. I stayed out longer than I planned." She nodded but didn't press for details. I took a sip, wincing as the hot liquid burned my tongue. For a moment, I considered telling her I knew everything about the elevator, the affair, the DNA results. But an unfamiliar sense of cruelty rose in me. I wanted her to squirm in uncertainty, to feel the silence weigh on her as it did on me. I set my mug down. "Tonight, do you want to grab dinner? Just us." My voice was calm, almost too casual. She looked startled, as if I'd asked her to confess a crime. "Dinner? I have a meeting with some colleagues." "Cancel it," I said softly, though my tone carried an edge. "I think we need to talk." Her fingers tightened around her phone. A flicker of panic crossed her features, gone in an instant. She tried to laugh it off. "Michael, you know it's not that easy. I'm in charge of." "Please," I cut her off, letting the syllable hang. The starkness in my voice made her flinch. I'd appreciate it. She stared at me, her jaw tensing, then gave a slow nod. "Okay, I can try to reschedule." I didn't say another word. I got up, rinsed my mug in the sink, and left. I could feel her gaze on my back, uncertain, worried. Good, I thought. Let her wonder. That evening, she did come home, but late. I was sitting in the living room with the lights dimmed, only the lamp near the window illuminating the space. She opened the door gently, as if sneaking in. When she saw me, she froze. I thought about how many times I waited for her to greet me with a kiss, how many times she waltzed in with an air of affection, an apologetic grin about being delayed. Now her posture told me she was bracing for a confrontation. I stood, walked toward the dining table where I'd set out 2 plates of lukewarm food. She followed hesitantly. I noticed she didn't take off her coat. "You said you wanted to talk," she began, her voice catching. I gestured to the plates. "I made dinner, but it's cold. Do you still want to eat?" She shook her head, eyes flicking to the floor. "I'm not hungry." I nodded slowly. Then I did something I'd never done in our marriage. I poured myself a double shot of bourbon in front of her without offering any explanation. She watched, her eyes reflecting the orange glow of the lamp. I took a sip. "I know." Those words hovered in the silence. Her brow furrowed. "Know what?" I swallowed the burn in my throat. "I know about you and Daniel." Even speaking his name made my stomach turn. "I know this isn't new, that you've been lying to me for a long time." Her eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape route. She let out a shaky breath. "Michael, listen, I saw the camera footage." I continued, my voice low but steady. "In the elevator, you and him. I also got test results." I was careful to keep my tone controlled. "Our younger son, he isn't mine." Olivia's face drained of color. She stepped back, nearly tripping on the edge of the rug. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stared at her, letting the silence speak for me. Finally, she shook her head, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I can explain," she whispered, though I heard no conviction in her voice. "Explain?" My throat was tight, but I refused to let it break me. Is there an explanation that makes this any better? Or is this the part where you say it's my fault for not being there, for not seeing how lonely you were? She stared at me, tears now streaming down her cheeks. I never wanted to hurt you, I laughed bitterly, setting the glass down on the table. Yeah, you just wanted to hide it. You did a great job, by the way. I was the perfect fool, never prying, never suspecting. God, I was so clueless. Her voice rose, trembling. It wasn't about you. I swear. It just happened. My rage flared. Nothing just happens. You made choices. You had a second life with him. You even let me believe our son was mine. Olivia covered her face with her hands, sobbing into them. But instead of feeling pity, I stood there, cold, watching her unravel. She dropped to sit on one of the dining chairs, tears dampening her cheeks. I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't. It all spiraled. I placed my palms on the table, leaning in. Spiraled? For years, apparently. That's a lot more than a spiral, Olivia. That's a whole separate life you built. She looked up, eyes red, and reached out. I didn't want to lose you. I was scared. I still love you, Michael. Her words felt like a punch. Spare me. Love? You think it's love when you sneaked around, lied to my face, made me believe something that wasn't real. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my tone from exploding. I'm done playing the clueless husband. I gave you everything, and you spat on it. She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. I'm sorry, she kept repeating between sobs. I stared at her, numb, silent. I had no interest in comforting her. In that moment, I realized I had nothing left to say. There was a hollowness in my chest, a final break that told me we would never be whole again. I took another sip of bourbon, letting it warm the back of my throat. Then I pivoted and walked upstairs without another word. Behind me, I heard her muffled cries. A part of me wanted to slam the door, to let my rage out in a million curses. Instead, I stayed quiet. Silence can be sharper than any yell. The next few days blurred into a tense stalemate. We barely spoke. She slept in the guest room, though I never told her to. I simply found her there one morning. We kept up appearances for our sons, ironically preserving the facade of a normal family. But the air between us was suffocating. Whenever our eyes met, I sensed the guilt in her, the resentment in me. I felt like a ghost in my own home. Everything looked the same, but the color was stripped away. The memories embedded in these walls, birthdays, anniversaries, holiday gatherings, felt false, like stale illusions propped up for a show that had already ended. One afternoon, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't part of the lie, so I visited a small bar downtown, the same one I'd gone to with Marla. It was early, nearly empty. I found a corner stool and ordered a whiskey neat. The bartender gave me a nod of recognition. I threw back a shot, ignoring the burn, then started on a second. I wasn't there to get drunk. I was there to hear the hum of background chatter, the clink of glasses, to remind myself that normal life continued outside my personal nightmare. In that half-lit space, with neon beer signs reflecting off the tables, I felt oddly at ease. It was the first time in weeks I allowed myself to breathe without the weight of betrayal crushing me. I still had no plan for how to move forward, but at least I could exist in a place where my thoughts had room to settle. Marla walked in, spotting me from across the room. She must have guessed I'd be here. She approached slowly, face filled with concern. "You all right?" she asked, slipping onto the stool beside me. I gave a tired shrug. "No, but I'm alive." She sighed, looking down at her own hands. "She told me you confronted her." I swirled my drink. "Yeah." An awkward silence stretched between us. "I wish I could say something to fix this," Marla whispered. "Nothing can fix it," I said simply. "It's done." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "You deserve better." I stared at the rows of bottles behind the bar, their labels blurred by the neon lights. I deserve the truth. but that's come and gone. She didn't argue. Eventually, she placed a hand on my shoulder, gave it a gentle squeeze, and left. I stayed for another hour, sipping in silence, letting the gloom of that bar wrap around me like a dark blanket. When I left, I resolved never to come back. I couldn't keep running from my own house. That night, Olivia was packing a bag when I walked into the bedroom. She froze, zipping it shut quickly, as if ashamed. "I'm leaving for a while," she said, voice trembling. "I need to sort things out. I can't stay here, pretending." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Running to him, she winced, tears on the brink. "Michael, please." I didn't press. At that point, I felt like a wound that had scabbed over. She gathered a few items, then walked toward the front door. Our older son was at a friend's place, the younger with her parents for the weekend. She paused near the living room couch, fiddling with a set of car keys. "What do I tell the kids?" she asked quietly, not meeting my eye. I let out a slow breath. "Tell them whatever makes you sleep at night." She flinched. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of the woman I once loved. Frightened, uncertain. A pang hit my chest, but it was too late for second thoughts. She opened her mouth as if to say more, but no words came. Then she left, the door closing softly behind her. I stood there, letting the darkness envelop me. A streetlight shone through the window, casting shadows on the walls. I thought about how that morning weeks ago, I'd stood in the same spot, waiting for a goodbye kiss I never got. Now I understood why. She'd already given her kisses to someone else. The next day blurred into routine tasks. Groceries, laundry, a run to the hardware store. I moved in a trance, performing mundane chores with mechanical precision. My mind wandered to old times. The day we bought this house, her excitement over painting the walls a soft cream. The dinner parties we hosted where she'd shine as the gracious hostess. Memories that felt like they belonged to another couple entirely. I knew I had to make a decision. The fear in me was now replaced by a simmering resolve. I couldn't stay in limbo forever. I needed closure, and if I couldn't get it from her, I'd take it myself. Late that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I made a call to a locksmith. The silhouette of the city glowed orange in the distance, the sky turning purple and navy. I didn't want to do anything rash, but the more I thought about Olivia returning whenever she felt like it, possibly bringing Daniel into the home I paid for, the more the idea made my blood boil. When the locksmith arrived, he looked at me a bit puzzled. "Changing your locks this late?" he asked, forcing a polite smile. I nodded. "I need it done. Tonight." He shrugged and got to work. I stood on the porch, the street lamp flickering overhead, reminding me of a failing spotlight on a lonely stage. The night air felt cool, the faint sound of traffic drifting from the main road. Once the locksmith was done, I paid him generously and locked up behind him. Inside, the house felt different. I turned off all the lights, one by one, until only the kitchen lamp remained. The silence pressed on my ears. In that hush, I realized I was preparing for her eventual return, and it wouldn't be welcome. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Olivia. "Tomorrow I'm coming to pick up more things. We need to talk." My heart thudded. She didn't specify whether Daniel was coming with her, but I assumed so. She'd always used him as her escape route. Something in me snapped. I'd done enough waiting, enough listening to her half-lies and forced apologies. I texted back 2 words. "Don't bother." She didn't reply. I pictured her showing my message to Daniel, or maybe just staring at it, tears welling up, but I felt no pity. If anything, it steeled my resolve. This was my house, my life, and I was done letting her shape it behind my back. Early the next morning, I gathered my son's belongings that were essential, clothes, a few cherished toys, and took them to my brother's place nearby. He was out of town, but I had a spare key. I stocked his guest room with whatever my boys might need should they come back to me suddenly. I didn't want them in the house when all hell broke loose. By noon, I packed my own suitcase. I left behind most furniture, decor, anything that felt tethered to the past. I took personal documents, a few keepsakes, photo albums, even though they now felt like lies. Once I placed everything in the trunk of my car, I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing. The walls, the floors, the furniture, it all seemed to hold echoes of another life. I paused in the master bedroom. The bed was neatly made, as if we were still a happy couple who cared about tidiness. I traced a finger along the bedpost, remembering the countless nights we shared. My stomach churned. Time doesn't heal, I murmured. It erases. The memory of us would fade, just like any other ghost. With that, I left the house, locking the door. The midday sun burned bright, reflecting off the neighbors' windows. I climbed into my car, sitting behind the wheel for a moment. My hands trembled. I took a deep breath and started the engine. I didn't plan a dramatic showdown. In truth, I wanted to be gone before she arrived. Let her come home to a hollow shell. Everything she once took for granted vanished. Let her see the emptiness she created. That would be my vengeance. Not a furious confrontation, but the silent reality that she lost what she thought would always be there. And so I drove, turning onto the main road, heading out of the neighborhood where we built our life. As I caught a red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the house shrinking behind me. I imagined her face when she discovered the locks changed, the living room stripped of personal items. I imagined Daniel standing beside her, uncertain, maybe carrying a box, ready to claim the space he'd been creeping into for so long. But all they'd find was silence. I felt a twinge in my chest, anger, sorrow, a sense of finality. Yet for the first time in weeks, my fear was gone. I could breathe. I had no illusions about the pain that awaited me, no naive hope we could reconcile. I only had myself, my dignity, and the faint possibility that time might erase the bitterness clinging to my soul. On the highway, I turned off the radio, letting the hum of the engine fill the car. My phone buzzed several times, presumably Olivia calling or texting. I ignored it. I wasn't ready to speak. I needed the distance, the quiet. My vision stayed fixed on the endless stretch of asphalt, the afternoon sun glaring at me through the windshield. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead, but I pressed on. Images of her and Daniel came unbidden. That elevator kiss, the night she must have spent in his arms, the son who wasn't mine. And yet, I'd raised him without knowing. The betrayal was too large for words. I gripped the steering wheel, forcing myself to blink back any tears. I was done crying. I drove for an hour, maybe more, until I pulled into a rest stop. My head throbbed. I got out, the hot summer air rushing over me. The place was sparse. A lonely gas station, a vending area, a few cars parked with drivers too exhausted to go on. I sat on a bench, ignoring the glare of a flickering street lamp overhead. The smell of asphalt and distant pine trees mingled in the dry wind. A random memory surged. One of our first dates. She came to watch me play in a recreational softball league. She cheered louder than anyone, her laughter echoing across the field. I'd never felt so proud of so alive. That moment was ours, untouched by betrayal or heartbreak. Now it felt like a hollow dream from someone else's life. I wondered if any part of her truly regretted what she'd done, or if she was relieved, finally free to be with Daniel without the burden of secrecy. The question churned my stomach. Let them have each other, I thought. Let them live in whatever illusions they want, while I carve out a new path. I refused to be a footnote in my own story. I got back on the road, heading toward my grandfather's old lakeside cabin, the only place that ever felt like home. It was a modest wooden structure by a small lake, about 2 hours north. I'd inherited it after he passed, and I rarely visited in recent years, too caught up in adult responsibilities. But now, it called to me like a sanctuary. I wanted to see the water shimmering under the sunset, wanted to breathe the pine-scented air and remember a time when trust wasn't broken. I arrived in the late afternoon, the sun dipping low over the treetops. Dust kicked up as I turned down the gravel driveway. The cabin was just as I remembered. Rustic, a little worn, but steeped in memories of fishing trips and nights spent by the fireplace. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat in silence, letting the final wave of tension roll off me. Inside, it smelled musty, unused. Dust motes danced in the golden light coming through the windows. I opened a few windows, letting in fresh air, then found the flashlight in the drawer near the door. I checked the fuse box. Everything still worked. The fridge was empty, of course, but I had enough supplies in the trunk to last me a couple of days. I sank into the old couch, exhaling slowly. My phone buzzed again. Without looking, I turned it off completely, tossing it onto the coffee table. No more calls, no more messages. Tonight, this place would be silent, and I would let my heart break in peace. The sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I watched from the porch, sipping water from a plastic bottle. Usually, I'd have been enthralled by the beauty, but now I could only think how life had changed in a matter of weeks. My marriage was over, my trust shattered, my future uncertain. And yet, beneath it all, there was a strange sense of relief, as if the worst had happened, and I survived it. Eventually, night settled in. The moonlight glimmered on the lake's surface, and the old lamp by the cabin door cast a pale glow on the porch. I stepped inside, lighting a single lamp in the living room. Shadows flickered on the wooden walls, reminiscent of the ones in my house back in Chicago. But these felt different, less menacing, more comforting. This was my space, untouched by her lies. I found my grandfather's old journal on the shelf. He used to jot down fishing notes, weather patterns, tidbits of wisdom. I flipped through the pages. His simple handwriting reminded me of simpler times. One entry read, "Life hurts, but it goes on. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it dims them enough to keep going." His words echoed my own thoughts. Time doesn't heal, it erases. I closed the journal, a lump in my throat. Outside, a breeze rustled the pines. I let the silence envelop me, thinking of all the lost kisses, lost faith, lost illusions. There was pain, yes. There was betrayal. But somehow, I found myself breathing a little easier, as though I'd finally stepped off a battlefield. The next morning, I woke up to birds chirping and sunlight streaming through the cabin windows. For a moment, I forgot everything that happened. Then the memory rushed back. I sat up, heart heavy, but determined. My phone lay on the table, turned off. I left it that way. I wandered down to the water's edge. The lake was still, reflecting the green canopy overhead. I knelt, letting the cool water run through my fingers. Once upon a time, I'd fished here with my grandfather, feeling the thrill of a tug on the line. Now I felt a different pull, one from inside. The realization that I was free. Not happy, not unscathed, but free from lies. I remembered the final words I exchanged with Olivia, the quiet that followed. I thought about how she might react today when she realized I'd taken what I could and vanished. Would she curse me, or would she collapse in tears? Would Daniel hold her and promise everything would be all right? The thought still stung, but I knew I couldn't control it. Standing there, I felt the urge to scream at the sky, to let out every ounce of anger, heartbreak, confusion. But I didn't. Instead, I closed my eyes, letting the warm sun envelop me. This was my moment, my chance to accept the pain and understand that I would move forward on my own terms. Later that day, I returned to the cabin, made a simple meal, and decided to finally turn my phone on. The screen lit up, displaying a slew of missed calls and voicemails, mostly from Olivia, a few from Marla, even one from my brother. My phone vibrated in my hand, the tension from those messages radiating through my palm. I put it on speaker, letting Olivia's voice fill the empty room. "Michael, please, I'm at the house. Why are the locks changed? Where are you? Her tone was frantic, breaking. Another voicemail. I'm sorry. I just need to talk to you. We can figure this out. The last one was shorter. He's here with me, Michael. And this isn't right. You can't just take off. Please, you owe me a conversation. My jaw clenched. I owe you, I muttered. Interesting. I deleted all the voicemails without responding. Maybe she deserved an explanation. Maybe not. But I had no words left to say. The time for talking was over. In a final act, I blocked her number. For once, I chose my own peace over her drama. Setting the phone aside, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The tears I'd withheld for so long finally threatened to surface. I let them come, silent and strong. Tears for the man I used to be, for the marriage I thought I had, for the family that turned out to be a lie. I cried without noise, the tears slipping down my cheeks, the cabin's walls bearing witness with quiet compassion. And when it was done, I felt lighter, emptied of that crushing weight. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and stepped outside onto the porch. Night came again, and with it, a comforting stillness. The lamp by the door flickered, but I didn't mind the darkness. I sat in a rocking chair, watching the moon's reflection over the lake. My thoughts wandered to the future, my sons, the life I'd have to rebuild. There was no easy path, but at least I had truth now. I couldn't predict what tomorrow would bring. Maybe an ugly legal battle, maybe a painful separation. But for this moment, the only sound was the gentle rustle of leaves and the lapping of water against the shore. I let myself sink into that serene backdrop, letting the quiet heal what it could. Time won't heal me entirely, I thought. But maybe, with enough nights like this, it will erase the sharp edges of the betrayal. Maybe one day I'll remember all this without that stab of pain in my chest. Until then, I'll keep breathing. I rocked slowly in the chair, the wood creaking beneath me, my eyes closing. The last thought in my mind before sleep took over was that I was, at last, alone, but on my own terms. I had survived the lies, the silence, the heartbreak. And though the road ahead looked dark, I felt a small ember of resolve burning in my chest. I was still me, and that had to be enough.